Her beauty wasn't meant for human eyes, because once you see it, you'll never be the same. I saw her, and in that moment, my mind shattered. A year locked away in the Psyche ward couldn't erase her face. This is the story of the night I looked into the eyes of something not of this world and lost my sanity. I've made an incredible error of judgment, but I don't know who to turn to. I can't tell anyone in the parish, but I feel as though my entire soul is unraveling. I can't keep this inside much longer, and so I'm writing it to you, though I fear it may already be too late. It was on my last evening before I was taken away, a woman came to my confessional. She wasn't like the usual penitents. Her clothes were ragged and she smelled of the streets. I had almost closed for the evening, but I still took her in. It's my duty, after all, and the season of Advent has its own calling for grace. She knelt down in the little box with a deep sigh. Her voice trembled with each word, almost as though it had been ripped from her chest by some invisible force. "Father," she began, "I think I've killed someone." At first I thought she was speaking metaphorically, but no. It was all too real. She spoke of a man, a figure she had seen lying in an alley days before. She hadn't helped him. She just watched him fade away, her gaze fixed on his suffering as he clutched at his chest, and then died. She said she did nothing, her silence a sin, for she could have spoken and kept him alive. "Do not blame yourself," I told her, my voice steady despite my unease. I was a priest long enough to know how the mind can twist simple events into insurmountable burdens. "You are forgiven. God is merciful." She shook her head, her frail fingers grasping the edge of the confessional. "No, Father, you don't understand. My sister will come for me. She's looking for me. She's going to punish me for not intervening." Her words struck me, unsettling me more than I would like to admit. But as much as I felt for her, I had to remind her that forgiveness was the path to healing. I encouraged her to stay for Mass. I had a sermon to deliver soon, and perhaps it would help her find peace. But she hesitated. "I need to tell you everything, Father. You need to understand why I couldn't help him." Her voice dropped to a whisper. It's my sister. She'll never forgive me. Please, let me explain." But I had no time. The eve of Christmas Eve Mass was about to begin, and I had obligations to my parish. "You are forgiven," I said firmly, "and God knows your heart. I welcome you to stay for Mass." I rose, but when I emerged from the confessional, there was no sign of her. No footsteps, no whisper of a troubled soul in the pews. She had vanished. Later, after the service, I stayed to lock up the church. The clock struck 11 as I made my way through the dimly lit nave. I usually don't mind staying after Mass. The solitude of the church at night has always been a source of comfort for me. But tonight, something felt different. I noticed a figure in the back pews, a shadowy form, cloaked and hunched. At first, I thought I had missed someone who had lingered after Mass, but then I realized there had been no one else there when I had finished the sermon. I called from the aisle, my voice cutting through the silence. "Excuse me, the sanctuary is closed for the night. I'm locking up." The figure stirred, and a soft old woman's voice replied, "I heard your sermon." I froze, unsure of how to respond. My mind went over the words I had spoken just an hour earlier, about how Christmas was a reminder of our relationship with God, how the first nativity was not the birth of Jesus alone, but the moment when even Adam and Eve celebrated with him, with the birth of Seth. The woman's voice trembled again, though this time it carried an unsettling weight, as though it had been buried deep within her for centuries. "Yes, I was there, watching them from the darkness. Adam and his new wife. You are right, they did celebrate." A chill swept over me. The blood in my veins turned cold. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice suddenly dry. The figure shifted in the shadows, a long, drawn-out sigh echoing through the church. Then slowly, the figure lifted its head, revealing glowing eyes peering out from beneath the hood. "I am the oldest daughter of Lilith," the woman said. "But Adam is not my father. My name is Seraphiel." My pulse quickened, but I didn't speak. I had read enough, studied enough, to understand the significance of what she said. Lilith, the first woman, the one cast away, the one forgotten. She leaned forward. "I am looking for my sister. You know her. She is the one who let Jehoshaphat die. You know who he is? You've heard the legend, Jehoshaphat with his lantern." I could feel the sweat trickling down my spine. This wasn't just some lost soul. This wasn't just a penitent asking for forgiveness. This wasn't even human. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. My voice trembled despite my best efforts. "My sister," she repeated, "is the one who failed him. She watched him as he wandered through the world, holding his lantern, and she did nothing." I stood rooted to the spot, trying to reconcile the impossible truth that had begun to manifest before me. "Where is she?" Seraphiel demanded, her voice now a hiss. I stammered. "I don't know." "Who are you?" "I told you already," she said, rising to her feet. Her form seemed to grow taller as she did, as though she was shedding her mortal guise. "I am Seraphiel, and I will find her. You cannot stop me." Before I could react, she threw back her cloak and hood, and in a blink, she was airborne, her wings unfurling, black as night, slicing through the dim church air. I turned and ran. My heart raced in my chest as I fled through the aisles, trying to reach the sacristy. But the air behind me grew heavy, thick with the weight of her presence. I could hear her just behind me, an inhuman growl rumbling from her throat. I threw myself against the door of the sacristy and fumbled for the keys, but before I could lock it, she was there. Her hands struck the door with the force of a battering ram. The sound, her growls, the monstrous hammering, echoed in the church like thunder. I begged for God's mercy, but I was alone in this. The door splintered, the walls trembled, and I heard her, still in the darkness, demanding justice. "I don't know where she is. She vanished." I heard myself protest as she was moving towards me, her eyes glowing in the darkness and fixed upon me. Her silhouette in the shattered doorway was tall and muscular, but curved and feminine. Her growls were deep and angry, like a wounded bear. "She cannot have left. You are hiding her." Seraphiel neared me, and I fell down, shaking and flinching. She hesitated and then asked, her voice suddenly a mixture of outrage and defeat, "Vanished." I stammered and wet myself, too terrified for composure. The creature looming over me thought for a moment. I said, "Vanished? You gave her absolution. She has gone to mother that little wretch. I'll skin her alive. Why, I'll—" Seraphiel paused. You will bring her back." "Be back?" I asked, my voice a pinched sound, unrecognizable. "You will go to purgatory. A dead priest is always there before Christmas. I've seen to that personally. From there, Limbo, when you reach the temple of Lilith, you will find my sister, and you will speak lamentation to her, and she will return to this world and complete her duties. Why must I always clean up her mess?" Seraphiel had calmed down, and somehow I felt like I was in even more terrible danger. She had said, "A dead priest," the way most people say Thanksgiving turkey. I moaned in dread, sensing her raised claws in the darkness. My execution was so fast and precise that I wasn't sure I was dead, until I noticed I could see my body laying beneath the horrible creature, quite ruined by her claws. I was definitely dead, if that was me down there. I floated above my remains for a moment, and then I felt a kind of calmness, my fear leaving me. I found myself drawn towards a distant glow that felt warm and inviting. There I was, in a misty realm, and beyond it there was a kind of desolate gray landscape with no sky. I knew that was where I was supposed to go, and so I drifted there. I saw many sad and broken things that were the souls of the lost, and I prayed for them as I went. It seemed like a very long time had passed, and I began to realize I was dead, and it saddened me, For I did not know I would be restored to life, resurrected upon the completion of my task. Instead, I thought about how I was not done with my life, how my parishioners still needed me, and I felt sorry for whoever found my grisly remains, as though slain by a wild animal. I found the temple of Lilith. There was a kind of reddish glow from inside. The structure was like a pyramid of great dark stones leaning together. There was a hall, and I entered with a kind of fear that was not from my physical body, for I was already dead. My fear was much deeper, older, and more primal. I feared for my very soul, my consciousness, my existence. The place was no temple, for I was a keeper of a sanctuary. Her place was a tomb. I beheld 4 pedestals, one for each of her daughters. Upon the first there were bones stacked, for one of her daughters was dead and removed from the world. The other had vanished and appeared in that place, and she looked like a homeless person, dressed in ragged clothing and kneeling humbly before a throne. I slowly began to look up and saw what sat upon that throne. What I beheld, that terrible beauty. It tore apart my mind, changing me into something else. In that moment, no secret of the universe was safe from my perception. If my mind was a chalice, then it wasn't merely overflowing with nightmarish wisdom, but cracked, melting under the wine of ageless horrors. At once I could see her in 2 forms. One slumbered, a seated and naked woman of gigantic size, and the other of vaguely crimson skin, 2 small ebony antlers from her head. She was both of these forms, one human and one demonic, and also, as my spirit burned before her, I saw she was 1,000 living things writhing together to make these bodies. And yet they were all dormant, dead. There was an indescribable wrongness to how still she was, as though her eternal corpse were a blight upon all of creation, never meant to be in such a state. I knew that from her all suffering sprang, and all forms of justice were merely vengeance, and there was something in me that became corrupted and damned to realize such a thing. Your sister sent me to retrieve you. I speak lamentation to you, for you have forsaken your sacred duties, I said to the one who knelt before her. And this betrayal, after you forgave me, I'll not let you rest, you mere mortal. You'll be the one to carry the lantern every Christmas Eve and never know death. I'll punish you for this. She stood, showing she was much like her sister beneath the rags that burst from her as she spread her wings. She grabbed me and dragged me through a coldness, all the way to where my spirit had left my body. My soul's glow and gripped it like a physical object. I felt her stuffing me back together, pumping my liquids, resuscitating me with her own putrid breath. I coughed and sat up, seeing that there was no mess. I was intact, every last drop. My priestly robes were shredded, and the door still smashed to smithereens, and the younger sister stood over me, admiring her handiwork. I felt my body like a sewn-up doll, stuffed haphazardly, and felt the phantom pain of being torn apart by Seraphield. I'll go, and I'll keep you where you go. You'll do the work of the immortal man we tasked with the lantern. You live again, priest, and you'll not know death for many ages. You'll ask me for it, and I won't let you have it. You should not have betrayed me. And then she left me there, presumably to return when my duties resume. I then broke down in utter anguish and insanity, driven mad by the terror of what I had seen and experienced. I was found there, and they thought I'd done the damage and torn my clothing, and my scars were like fresh scratches, like I had hurt myself. I was taken to the psychiatric ward and treated. It was only a few days ago they released me. As I write to you, I have the lantern. I must begin my journey with it. A miserable task on foot, through the cold, through the night, alone. From Christmas Eve to Christmas Eve, I will only know this simple duty, to carry this light. I will send this letter to you, my friend, and consider it also to be my confession, for I told no one what happened to me. I've seen her, this Leminiel of whom I betrayed. She was there. She was one of the doctors who treated me. Indeed, watching over me. She decided I was cured, and she can walk among us, as anyone, I suppose. But I've seen her true form. I've seen them both, and I know they are not like us. They live forever or become as bones on the pedestal. They are out there, doing terrible things with terrible anger. But they are just her daughters, Father O'Connor. They are just satraps of Lilith, and I have seen her terrible beauty.